Hey, it's Marianne Hickman back here on the Marianne Hickman Show with Talk Tips number 39. Is PowerPoint always bad for your keynote? Check it out right here in this episode. Well, first of all, if you're new to the Marianne Hickman Show, welcome. This is the show where we talk public speaking, everything to do with it. We go from PowerPoints to stage geography to making money from stage, using the stage to push your business into the limelight. Because listen, nobody can buy from you if they don't know who you are, right? So in this one, we're going to talk about PowerPoint. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, and all of the reasons why it's sometimes great to use for your presentation, but a lot of the things to avoid. And trust me, I know this from experience. So let's get right into it. Now, a lot of the litmus test you can use to determine whether or not PowerPoint is going to support your keynote or whether it's going to distract from your keynote is to really put yourselves in the audience's seats. Put your butt in their chair and then take a look at your slides. It's really hard to be objective when you're doing this on your own. So if you need some help, get a friend and say, hey, I want you to just give me total feedback and look at these slides with me. There are some things that you're going to miss as a slide creator. You're going to miss them as a producer of your slides that you're going to catch as an audience member. Think about all of the presentations and the keynotes that you've been to where the slides are not supporting the message. That's the keynote. Like that is the key element to this is, are the slides helping the speaker or are they getting in the way? Are the slides helping the audience take in the information, or are the slides getting in the way? So I'm going to give you a few things to watch for in your slides, and I want you to put all of your production through this test. Number one thing I want you to look for is the condensed nature of the text on your slide. Is there too much information on your slide? Is it a bunch of little text that is so full that it's distracting for you to read as a keynote facilitator, and you're going to find the audience squinting at it and they can't see it, and it's maybe in the back of the room too far down. We'll talk about the layout in just a minute, but if there's too much going on your slides, you're going to be distracted by it, and your audience isn't even going to hear what you have to say because they're so distracted by all of the clutter visually with all of the text on your slides. By the way, this is also the same reason that I don't hand out papers to my audience before I start, because the moment I get on stage and there's a piece of paper on the audience's chair, guess what the first thing they're going to do is? They're not going to hear a word that I'm saying because they're so distracted with the handout. So I'm not going to hand out stuff, but I'm also not going to clutter my slides with too much text. Here's thing number two that I want you to put through, again, this litmus test. And if you're having someone go through your slides with you, a second set of eyes, I always recommend it. I have Richard go through my slides quite a bit, and then I always have audience members go through my slides, like members of my community. They go through these with me from time to time. And then I'm watching for cues. I'll get into cues in just a minute. But the second thing I want you to notice is layout. So when you are formulating your slides, you're designing these things, you want to think about, are the people in the front of the room going to be able to see? That's pretty much a given. They're the closest ones. But I want you to consider the people sitting in the back of the room, the very, very back. Imagine what they're dealing with in their visual desktop, in their line of sight, in other words. They're dealing with other people's heads in front of them, especially if they're short like me. They're dealing with distance from the slide, so the text needs to be a little bit bigger for them to read. And they're also dealing with their peripherals, so distractions. The slides are taking up less visual space from their perspective than the people in the front row. So when you're crafting your slides, remember not to put important information on the very bottom of the slide where it might get missed. You don't want to put the content, in other words, on the bottom of your slide. Great things to have on your bottom of the slide are stuff that never changes, so they can see it from one slide to the next. That's why I like to put my Instagram handles on there. It's important, but it's repetitive. So it's not like they're going to miss it from one slide to the next. It's there the whole time. So my website, my Instagram, my social handles, my contact information, just the bottom headliner, kind of like you see on the news when they put those screens up. the bottom information, the keynote speaker's name, stuff that doesn't go away from slide to slide to slide. You can put it down there because that's going to stay there and they can kind of move around and see that from one slide to the next. But if it disappears, it probably shouldn't go on the next slide. Especially now, you might be doing highlight reels with text and you might have captions on that. Those captions should not go at the bottom. A lot of people make this mistake. The captions should go on the top. If you're playing a reel or like a demo reel or a promo reel for your foundation, all of those captions need to go on the top. So again, the people in the back can read that. Okay, thing number 3 to consider when you're building your slides is, does my slide take the show? Does it take over for me? Am I just, as a presenter, just reading from my slides, or do they offer bullet points that I can expound on? The only time I really want to read directly exactly what's on the slide is if I have a really powerful quote. If I've got something in quotations or a statistic, maybe I'm sharing how many times Dyson failed before they got their vacuums accepted. Or maybe I'm reading about how many times J.K. Rowling had to submit her book to publishers, and I'm sharing stats. Those I will quote directly from the slides, and then I'll draw the audience's attention to the slides with me. But other than that, I'm not reading directly off the slides. I'm offering bullet points. So especially when you're delivering your content, maybe you have your 3 content pieces up there, boom, boom, boom. I'm not going to give that away all at once, by the way. I'm going to share one bullet point on the slide and I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to use my story to share this. This is where the slides are supporting me as a presenter. They're supporting the audience, right? And then I'm going to bring up my next bullet point for my content and talk about that, share my stories about that. And then I'm going to bring up the 3rd bullet point in my content, share the story, talk about it. And that's when people will start to pull out their phones and take a picture once all 3 happen. By the way, when you have people taking a picture, they're going to do it for one of 2 reasons. Number 1, you have too much on there and they feel like they need to take a picture so that they feel they will go back later and reread it. Trust me, we never do that. When's the last time you as an audience member took a picture of a slide and then you went back and read it later? It just doesn't happen. So that's an indicator that you've got too much. But the other reason people take pictures is when they like the information. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. If they're taking a picture, like at the moment when you put up an amazing slide with all 3 of your bullet points or maybe all 5 of your keys or whatever it is, that means they like what they're seeing. But it's your job as a presenter to give all the information, share the story, share the information, help them absorb it before that slide happens, okay? Okay, here's something else to avoid. This is, I think, step number 4. I want you to avoid your slides having too much animation, the movement on the slides. If it's distracting from you, if you've got people that are looking at the slides when they're looking at you, that's an indicator that there's too much going on. That's distracting the audience from you. And here's the other thing. If your slides are taking over the show and then your tech fails, what happens? Are your people going to enjoy watching you more than they're watching the slides? So avoid, the sweeping in text and avoid the animations that you might be using on Canva when you're using tech on slides as much as you possibly can, because their focus, their attention should be on you and the transformation that's happening within themselves. Okay, I want to give you a single last checkpoint for all your slides. Once you have created your slides for your keynote, here's a couple of tips. The first tip is to present without your slides. The last thing I want is your slides to act like a teleprompter. They shouldn't be the thing that feeds your keynote. Your keynote comes from you. Your keynote comes from your story. The keynote comes from your heart. The slides are there to illustrate and support. So once you've done all your slides, practice without them as if you don't have them. Number 2, once you've gone and done all your slides, think about how much time you have on stage. Now, I'm not talking about a webinar. Webinar is different. A webinar, you need a lot of engagement visually because you have people on a digital screen. I'm talking about in-person, live on a stage. When you have all of your slides done for your live stage, go back and delete probably 2/3 of them. I'm serious. 2/3 of your slides should be gone. On a keynote, for a 45-minute keynote, I probably have maybe 20 slides, Richard, wouldn't you say? If I have a keynote, I've cut so much out of it because the story comes from me, not from my slides. So when you're on a keynote, have someone go through and say, okay, can I do without this? Can I do without this? Can I do without this? What's most powerful? What supports me? Things that might support you. A picture. maybe of a historical point in time. So I have a picture of when I first started speaking at the age of 12. I like to throw that picture up there because that picture speaks 1,000 words. It really does. It shares so much of my story that I can illustrate with that image instead of using stage time to do that. Okay, next, if you're teaching something that it's an idea that builds on itself or it's really complex, a visual aid through a slide can help with that. However, again, you got to plan for everything without your slides. So if you have a complex idea and you lose your slides, are you able to draw it on a piece of paper that you might have on stage with you? Are you able to describe it in full detail while you have your audience draw it on their paper? So your slide can help with that. But again, have your backup so that you know how to walk people through this visual representation of your super complex idea. We talked about this a moment ago, but your slides should also be a memory anchor. They should have a single phrase or a single visual, something that you can come back to. And this can be repeated, by the way, through your slide. That's okay. But when you have that memory anchor, again, that should be something that the audience should be able to draw on their own. If your slides fail, if your slides are working great, this is when they're going to lean in, they're going to pull out their phones, and they're going to take a picture. And just a hint, a word to the wise, as a presenter and as a facilitator, when you see people, one or two, start pulling out your phones, this is a great opportunity to give a state change and say, okay, guys, if this is valuable to you, pull out your phones and take a picture of this. You're not going to want to miss it. And then explain what's on the slide, talk about it, fill it in with your story, fill it in with your colors. Okay, just final thoughts here. Not only should you shorten the number of slides or reduce the number of slides for your keynote, but I want you to eliminate most of what's on your slides. I want you to keep it simple. That's the number one rule with visual aids in your presentation. Keep it simple. Reduce your text. Reduce the number of pictures on each slide. Reduce the number of words on each slide. The shorter you can make it, the better. Some people have said maybe no more than 6 words per slide. I know that sounds really small, but that's where the value comes in. If you can give it to me in shorter, more succinct language, that's even better. The next thing, again, remember to be able to practice without your slides. I want you to be able to deliver your entire keynote should your slides tech out and glitch out and they totally fail. And then again, word to the wise, I know this goes without saying, but I want to give you 2 quick tips. Number 1, the images that you decide to use on your slides, when you blow them up to the size of that huge screen, you got to have high quality enough images to where they don't pixelate and they look really crappy when you get up there on the main stage. Second thing, and this will bite you in the butt if you don't do it, when you're giving your slides to whatever host or event, if it's not your host or event, or maybe if it is your host, you're hosting your own event at your own event center and you're moving your slides to a different computer or you have to transmit them, practice, do a run through. Word to the wise, your fonts might not always translate. And if your fonts don't translate and they get this replaced font up on screen, it can look really, really bad. And all that hard work you put into designing and minimalizing your slides is kind of kiboshed at that point because they don't look as good as they did when you were working on them. So do a practice, do a run through, make sure your fonts translate, make sure your colors translate, make sure your pictures translate. Always do a run through before the main event if you possibly can. And guys, I know you're going to crush it. So here's what I want you to do. If this was valuable to you, give me a like and a subscribe. But more importantly, I want you to send this video to someone that you care about, someone that you're cheering for, someone in the space who is also a speaker. We'll see you in the next Talk Tips. Take care.
Marianne Hickman here again. Listen, I hope super helpful for you. Maybe you'll learn something new. Share with me in the comments what was valuable. Or if you have this whole separate question like, hey, I wanted to know about this. I wanted to know about stage fright. I want to know how about my presentation on stage. I want to know about how to dress on stage. Anything that you want to know that's relevant to growing your business through stages, put in the questions. Because guess what? I go through and answer all of those personally. That's not an agency or a VA. That's me going through and looking at your questions because you are who I am here for. So last thing is I want you to get this database. If you haven't gotten it already, now I've got thousands of downloads on this thing, so maybe you've got it, but if not, make sure you go to mariannehickman.com/database. What that's going to do is take you to a page. You're going to input all of your information. We're going to send the database to you. You're going to request access to it. I keep it locked down so I can make sure I get it to just the right people, and you're going to request access. And then once you have that, you're going to go through and apply to podcasts that have the topic that you'd be an expert speaking on. Here's the thing. I get this database updated twice a week. So there's always new stuff in there. And if you're a podcaster, there's even a list of guests that you can have on your show. on that podcast. Maybe you end up doing a podcast swap and you grow your audience that way. Regardless, I want you to get it. So MarianneHickman.com/database, and we'll see you in the next Talk Tips.